4 gold stripes on a blazer usually demand immediate respect in an airport terminal. It signifies thousands of hours of flight time, mastery of heavy machinery, and the responsibility for hundreds of lives. Yet, standing at the threshold of the Boeing 777, Captain Jordan Banks found her path blocked by a wall of arrogance. She wasn't seen as the commander of the vessel. She was treated as a trespasser in her own office. A sneering senior captain didn't just deny her entry. He tried to destroy her career. He didn't know that by barring her from that cockpit. He wasn't saving the flight, he was sealing his own fate and exposing a corporate cover-up that would shake the aviation industry to its core. The fluorescent lights of JFK's Terminal 4 hummed with the manic energy of a Tuesday evening rush. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the tarmac into a blur of grey concrete and flashing amber lights. For most travelers, the weather was a nuisance, a precursor to delays and turbulence. For Captain Jordan Banks, it was just another variable in the equation of flight. Jordan adjusted the cuffs of her uniform blazer, the 4 gold stripes on her epaulets catching the overhead light. She moved through the concourse with a practiced, rhythmic gait, the walk of someone who had spent half their life traversing airports. She pulled her flight bag behind her, the wheels gliding silently over the terrazzo floor. At 38, Jordan was young to be a Czech airman and a relief captain for AeroVantage's flagship international routes. But her resume was bulletproof, 10 years in the Air Force flying C-17 Globemasters, followed by a rapid ascent through the commercial ranks. She checked her watch, 19:15. She was scheduled to deadhead on Flight 909 to London Heathrow, then take command of the return leg. But a last-minute crew scheduling error meant she was now the active relief pilot for the outbound journey. The original relief pilot had timed out due to delays in Chicago. Jordan reached Gate B32. The boarding area was a sea of impatient passengers. The gate agent, a harried woman named Sarah with a headset slightly askew, looked up as Jordan approached the podium. "Captain Banks," Sarah asked, relief washing over her face. "Thank God. Crew scheduling said you were inbound. Captain Hatcher is already on board, and he's eager to push back. We're already 20 minutes behind schedule due to the baggage loaders." "I'm here. Sarah, let's get this bird in the air," Jordan said, flashing a calm, professional smile. She scanned her badge at the reader. It beeped green. "Go right ahead. The rest of the crew is doing pre-flight checks." Jordan walked down the jet bridge. The air grew cooler and smelled of jet fuel and damp recycled air, the perfume of aviation. She loved it. She stepped onto the plane, nodding to the lead flight attendant, a tall man named David, who was busy organizing the galley carts. "Good evening, Captain," David said, spotting the stripes immediately. "Welcome aboard." "Thanks, David. Tough night for a crossing." "Bumpy ride expected over the Atlantic, but the coffee is fresh." He winked. Jordan turned left, toward the cockpit. The door was open. Inside, the flight deck was a sanctuary of illuminated buttons, screens, and the soft whir of avionics fans. In the left seat sat Captain Bradley Hatcher. Hatcher was an institution at AeroVantage, but not necessarily a beloved one. He was a man in his late 50s with a thick neck, a complexion that suggested high blood pressure, and a reputation for treating the cockpit like his personal kingdom. He was old guard, the type of pilot who reminisced about the days when autopilot was a luxury and HR departments didn't exist. In the right seat was First Officer Liam Thorne, a young pilot who looked like he was barely out of flight school. He was currently punching waypoints into the flight management computer. Looking stressed, Jordan stepped into the doorway. "Good evening. Gentlemen, Captain Jordan Banks, relieving for the crossing." Hatcher didn't turn around. He kept his eyes on the overhead panel, flipping switches with aggressive snaps. "We're full up, sweetheart. Galley is back that way. Tell David I want my coffee black, no sugar, and I want it before pushback." The silence that followed was heavy. "Liam," the first officer, froze, his hand hovering over the keypad. He slowly turned his head, eyes wide, looking from Hatcher to Jordan. Jordan didn't flinch. She had dealt with men like Hatcher her entire career. She stepped fully into the cockpit, dropping her flight bag with a heavy thud that vibrated through the floor. "I think you need to check the crew manifest again." "Captain Hatcher," Jordan said, her voice dropping an octave, devoid of warmth. "I'm not cabin crew. I'm your relief captain, and unless you want to fly this heavy to London by yourself while violating FAA rest requirements, I suggest you make room for my gear." Hatcher finally swiveled his chair. He looked her up and down, his eyes narrowing. He didn't look at the stripes on her shoulders. He looked at her face, her hair, her presence. He saw a black woman standing in his domain, and his brain simply refused to compute the data. "Banks," Hatcher scoffed, a dry, dismissive sound. "Crew scheduling said they were sending a relief pilot, not a diversity hire for a photo op. Look, miss, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, or if you're some trainee looking for a jump seat ride, but I am in no mood." "Get out of my cockpit!" Jordan felt the heat rise in her neck, but she channeled it into ice. "This isn't a debate. Hatcher, my name is on the release. I am type-rated on this aircraft, and I am qualified to sit in that seat. Now, are we doing a briefing, or are you going to keep wasting fuel while the APU burns?" Hatcher stood up. He was a large man, using his height to intimidate. He stepped past the center console, invading Jordan's personal space. "Let me make this crystal clear," Hatcher growled, his voice low enough that the passengers boarding behind them couldn't hear, but loud enough for David and Liam. "I don't fly with strangers I haven't vetted, and I certainly don't fly with someone who looks like they should be handing out peanuts. I don't care what badge you printed out at Kinko's. You are not flying this plane." "Are you denying a designated crew member entry to the flight deck?" Jordan asked, pulling her phone from her pocket. "Because that is a reportable offense, Bradley, and I will report it." "I'm denying an unauthorized entry," Hatcher countered, his face reddening. "Get off my plane before I have you dragged off." The tension in the narrow entryway of the Boeing 777 was suffocating. First Officer Liam Thorne looked like he wanted to melt into his seat. He knew exactly who Jordan Banks was. He had read an article about her landing a crippled cargo jet in a snowstorm 2 years prior. But he was on probation, and crossing Bradley Hatcher was career suicide. So, Liam looked down at his iPad, saying nothing. "You have 3 seconds to move," Hatcher said, pointing a thick finger toward the cabin door. "I have a duty to this flight," Jordan said, holding her ground. She unlocked her phone and brought up the crew scheduling app, turning the screen toward him. "Read it. Banks, J. Captain, employee ID 49221. Hatcher slapped the phone out of her hand. It wasn't a hard strike, but it was enough to knock the device to the carpeted floor of the cockpit. The sound was sickeningly loud in the small space. "I said get out!" Hatcher shouted. This time, the passengers heard. Heads turned in the first-class cabin. A businessman in 2A lowered his newspaper. A mother in 3B stopped settling her child. David, the lead flight attendant, stepped forward, his face pale. "Captain Hatcher, please, we have passengers boarding." "Call the gate agent," Hatcher barked at David, ignoring Jordan, "and call airport security. I have an unruly individual refusing to deplane. I want her removed." "Now." Jordan bent down and retrieved her phone. The screen wasn't cracked, but the line had been crossed. This was no longer a professional dispute. This was assault, however minor, and a gross violation of authority. But Jordan knew the optics. An angry black woman shouting at a white captain in a uniform would not play well on the evening news, regardless of who was right. She had to remain the professional. "You don't need to call security," Jordan said softly. "I'll step onto the jet bridge. But Bradley, you are making a mistake that you cannot undo." "Go!" Hatcher pointed to the door. Jordan turned and walked out of the cockpit. As she entered the cabin, she saw the sea of faces staring at her. 50 pairs of eyes judging her. Some looked confused, others looked annoyed. "Is she drunk?" A woman in the second row whispered loudly to her husband. Probably affirmative action gone wrong. The husband muttered back. Not quietly enough. Jordan's stomach twisted. She gripped the handle of her flight bag until her knuckles turned white. She walked past them, head held high, though she felt the burning shame of being ejected from the job she had earned through blood, sweat, and thousands of perfect landings. She stepped back onto the jet bridge. Sarah, the gate agent, came running down the slope, looking terrified. 2 Port Authority police officers were jogging behind her, their radios crackling. "What is happening?" Sarah asked, breathless. Captain Hatcher called down, saying there's a security breach. Jordan held up her hands, palms open. "There is no breach. Sarah, Hatcher is refusing to acknowledge my credentials. He assaulted me, slapped my phone from my hand, and ordered me off." The 2 officers, Officer Reynolds and Officer Tate, slowed down as they saw Jordan. They saw the 4 stripes. They saw the ID badge. They saw the calm demeanor. "Captain," Officer Reynolds asked, confused. "We got a call about an unruly passenger." "I'm the relief pilot," Jordan stated flatly. "Captain Hatcher has locked me out." At that moment, Hatcher stuck his head out of the plane door. "Officers, remove her. She's disrupting my pre-flight. I want her trespass notice filed immediately. We are departing in 10 minutes. "Sir," Officer Reynolds started, "this is a pilot." "She is not my pilot," Hatcher yelled, spittle flying. "If she's not off this jet bridge in 2 minutes, I'm clearing the entire plane and we'll do a full security sweep. Do you want to be responsible for cancelling a transatlantic flight?" "Officer." It was a power play. Hatcher knew the airline management would prioritize getting the plane in the air over sorting out a personnel dispute on the ground. He was betting that the system would bend to his will because he was the captain, the white male authority figure, and the clock was ticking. Officer Reynolds looked at Jordan apologetically. "Ma'am?" "Captain?" "Look. If he's the pilot in command, he has the final say on who is on his aircraft. It's maritime law, basically. We can't force him to take you. We have to ask you to return to the terminal so they can sort this out there." Jordan looked at Hatcher, who was smirking triumphantly in the doorway. He thought he had won. He thought he had humiliated her and cemented his dominance. But as Jordan looked at him, her eyes drifted past his shoulder to the fuselage of the aircraft, through the gap between the jet bridge hood and the plane's skin. She could see a portion of the fuselage just above the forward cargo door. She narrowed her eyes. The rain was coming down harder now, washing over the aluminum skin of the Boeing, but right there, near the static port, The water wasn't beading correctly. There was a streak, a dark, slightly viscous streak that was being diluted by the rain, but was clearly originating from a seam near the nose gear, hydraulic fluid. It was subtle. If you were just doing a walk around in the rain, rushing because you were 20 minutes late. You might miss it if you were arrogant and assumed the mechanics did their job perfectly. You wouldn't even look. But Jordan looked. She looked back at Hatcher. "Fine," she said, her voice eerily calm. "I'll leave the jet bridge." Hatcher snorted. "Smart choice. Maybe try Spirit Airlines. They're hiring." He turned and slammed the aircraft door shut. The heavy mechanism locked with a final, metallic clunk. "Ma'am, if you'll come with us," Officer Tate said gently. "I'm coming," Jordan said. She didn't walk toward the terminal, though. She walked to the window of the jet bridge, looking down at the tarmac below. "Ma'am, I need to make a phone call," Jordan said, pulling out her phone. She didn't call crew scheduling. She didn't call the chief pilot. She dialed a number that very few pilots had saved in their favorites. It was the direct line to Elias Vance, the regional director of the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, Flight Standards District Office. They had served together in the Air Force. "Jordan." Elias's voice answered after 2 rings. "It's late. Everything okay?" "Elias," Jordan said, her eyes fixed on the darkening puddle forming under the nose gear of Flight 909. "I need you to authorize an immediate ramp inspection on AeroVantage Flight 909 at JFK, Gate B32. "What, why, Jordan? That's a nuclear option. Is this about a dispute?" "Bradley Hatcher just kicked me off the flight," Jordan said. "But that's not why I'm calling. Elias, he missed a hydraulic leak on the nose gear assembly. I saw it from the bridge. It's weeping purple fluid. If he retracts that gear after takeoff, the pressure differential could blow the line. He's about to take 300 people over the Atlantic with a ticking time bomb." There was a pause on the other end. The seriousness of the accusation hung in the air. "Are you sure, Jordan? If we stop a fully loaded 777 on the taxiway and find nothing, it's your license on the line for filing a false safety report. The airline will sue you for the delay costs. It'll be millions." Jordan watched the tug connect to the front landing gear of the plane. "I'd rather lose my license than watch that plane go down on CNN tonight. Stop the plane. Elias." "Now." "I'm making the call to the tower," Elias said. "God help you if you're wrong." The line went dead. Jordan turned to the police officers. "Gentlemen, you might want to wait. That plane isn't going anywhere." Inside the cockpit, Hatcher strapped himself in. "Finally," he grumbled to Liam. "Let's get out of here. Run the before start checklist." "Captain," Liam said nervously. Did she say something about the manifest?" "She's a glorified stewardess trying to play pilot," Hatcher snapped. "Focus, Liam. We are burning time." "Ladies and gentlemen," Hatcher's voice boomed over the PA system, smooth and reassuring, the perfect pilot voice. "This is Captain Hatcher. Apologies for the delay. We had a minor personnel issue to resolve. We are now cleared for pushback and will have you on your way to London shortly. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight." He released the parking brake. The tug driver acknowledged the signal. The massive plane began to move backward. Hatcher smiled. He had won. Then, the radio crackled. Not the ground control frequency, but the emergency guard frequency, cutting through everything. "AeroVantage 909. This is JFK Tower. Hold position immediately. Do not..." "I repeat, Do not start engines. Hatcher frowned, grabbing the mic. Tower, this is 909. We have pushback clearance. What is the problem? 909. We have a federal stop order on your aircraft. You are ordered to hold position. Ground units are en route to your aircraft. Shut down APU and prepare for boarding by federal agents. Hatcher's face went from red to white. Federal agents? For what? He looked out the side window. Down on the tarmac, through the rain, he saw 3 black SUVs with flashing red and blue lights tearing across the apron, heading straight for his nose gear, and standing in the window of the jet bridge, watching it all with arms crossed, was Captain Jordan Banks. The silence inside the cockpit of Flight 909 was absolute, save for the hum of the cooling fans and the rhythmic thumping of rain against the windshield. Captain Bradley Hatcher sat frozen, his hand still gripping the thrust lever, his knuckles white. The command from the tower echoed in his mind. Federal stop order. "What did you do?" First Officer Liam Thorne whispered, his voice trembling. He wasn't asking Hatcher, he was asking the universe. He stared out the side window at the flashing red and blue lights reflecting off the wet tarmac. "That's not airport security, Captain. That's the Department of Transportation. That's the feds." "Shut up, Liam," Hatcher snapped, though the venom in his voice lacked its usual bite. He was scrambling, his mind racing through the checklist of his sins. Had he missed a recertification? Was this about the overtime dispute? Tondo system. But federal agents didn't storm a tarmac for payroll issues. This was operational. "Tower, 909. Hatcher keyed the mic, his voice tight. "We are shutting down engines. But I want it on record, Dirkut, that this is an unauthorized interference with a commercial flight. We are losing our slot time. 909, save it for the inspector. Do not leave the flight deck until instructed," the controller replied, their tone clipped and unsympathetic. Below them, on the rain-slicked concrete, the scene was chaotic, yet precise. The 3 black SUVs had formed a perimeter around the nose of the Boeing 777. Men and women in dark windbreakers emblazoned with FAA and NTSB in yellow letters were stepping out into the downpour. Leading them was Director Elias Moore. He was a man of average height, but immense gravity, with a face weathered by years of squinting at crash sites and reading redacted reports. He didn't run. He walked with a terrifying purpose toward the nose gear. Up in the jet bridge, Jordan Banks hadn't moved. She stood by the window, her arms still crossed, her blazer damp from the humidity. The Port Authority officers, Reynolds and Tate, were now looking at her with a mixture of awe and apprehension. "You called the regional director?" Officer Reynolds asked, impressed. "On a cell phone. I called a friend," Jordan corrected, her eyes never leaving the scene below. "A friend who knows I don't cry wolf." "If you're wrong," Tate started. "I know," Jordan said softly. "If I'm wrong, my career ends tonight. I'll be blacklisted. I'll be the pilot who cried safety because her feelings got hurt. But look down there. Officer, watch the flashlight." Down on the tarmac, Elias Moore clicked on a heavy-duty tactical flashlight. The beam cut through the rain and darkness, hitting the massive strut of the nose landing gear. He wasn't looking at the tires. He was looking higher, at the hydraulic actuator assembly, the complex muscular system that allowed the 300-ton bird to steer and retract its legs. Elias crouched. He reached out a gloved hand and wiped a finger across the metal strut. He brought it close to his face, inspecting the residue, even from the height of the jet bridge. Jordan could see the result. He held his finger up to the light. It glistened with a deep, violet sheen. Skydroll. But Elias didn't stop there. He moved the light further up, tracing the line of the leak to its source. He paused. He leaned in closer, his face inches from the machinery. He stayed there for a long time, the rain soaking his back. Then he stood up slowly, pulled a camera from his jacket, and snapped 3 photos. He turned to his team and made a cutting motion across his throat. Ground the plane. He then looked up at the cockpit window, pointing a finger directly at the captain's seat, and then pointed to the ground. "Get down here." Is that bad?" Officer Tate asked Jordan. Jordan let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Her shoulders dropped an inch. "That wasn't just a leak." "Officer, leaks happen. O-rings fail." But Elias just took photos. That means he found evidence of tampering or negligence. He found something that wasn't just broken, it was ignored. Inside the plane, the intercom chimed. It was David, the lead flight attendant. "Captain?" David's voice wavered. There are agents coming through the cabin door. They're asking for the flight logbook and the maintenance release forms." Hatcher ripped his headset off. "This is insane. Banks set me up." She probably poured coffee on the strut before she came up here. "Captain, please," Liam said, unbuckling his harness. "We have to comply." The cockpit door opened. It wasn't David. It was a woman in a soaked FAA windbreaker, water dripping from her hood. She didn't smile. "Captain Hatcher, First Officer Thorne." She asked. "This is harassment." Hatcher spat, standing up. "I want your badge number. I want your supervisor." "My supervisor is under the plane, inspecting the hydraulic line you signed off on 20 minutes ago," the agent said calmly. "I need both of you to gather your personal effects and vacate the flight deck immediately. This aircraft is now a crime scene." "Crime scene," Hatcher laughed, a high, incredulous sound. "It's a mechanical issue, at worst. Not when the maintenance log shows the leak was identified in Chicago 2 days ago and deferred without proper authorization, and then signed off as fixed by a pilot who didn't even step out of the cockpit to check it tonight." The agent countered. "That's falsification of federal documents. Captain, now move." The walk of shame was excruciating. Hatcher grabbed his jacket and hat, his face a mask of fury. He stormed out of the cockpit, pushing past the agent. The first-class cabin was silent. Every passenger was watching. They had seen the lights, the police, the delay. Now they saw their captain being evicted. Hatcher kept his eyes forward, refusing to acknowledge the confusion and fear in the eyes of the people who had trusted him with their lives. He marched down the aisle, into the galley, and out toward the jet bridge. He burst through the aircraft door, expecting to see a maintenance crew he could scream at. Instead, he saw Jordan Banks. She was leaning against the wall of the jet bridge, looking calm, composed, and utterly vindicated. The 2 police officers stood behind her like a Praetorian guard. Hatcher stopped. The realization hit him like a physical blow. She hadn't left. She had watched the whole thing. "You," Hatcher snarled, stepping toward her. "You did this. You called them. You petty, vindictive little—" "Stop," Jordan said. She didn't shout. She didn't raise her hands. She simply spoke with the authority of someone who knows they are holding all the aces. "I saved your life, Bradley, and the lives of everyone on that plane. You were about to take off with a compromised nose gear. If you had retracted that gear at 200 knots, the pressure would have blown the actuator. You would have lost steering, maybe even the ability to lower the gear again. You would have been belly landing at Heathrow if you made it that far. You don't know what you're talking about, Hatcher yelled, his composure shattering. You're a diversity hire. You think because you flew some cargo crates for the military, you know heavy commercial iron. I have more time taxiing than you have flying. And yet, Jordan said, pointing out the window, you missed the purple puddle. Behind Hatcher, Elias Moore came up the stairs from the tarmac, shaking the rain off his jacket. He looked grim. Bradley Hatcher? Elias asked. Who wants to know? Hatcher shot back. Director Elias Moore, FAA, he said, flashing his badge. We need to talk. Not here. In the terminal. Officer Reynolds, please escort the captain to the airport police station. Police station? Hatcher paled. Am I under arrest? Not yet, Elias said. But you're certainly grounded. Hand over your ATP certificate and your airport ID. Hatcher stared at him. You can't do this. I'm a senior captain. Hand them over, Elias said, his voice hard as steel. Or I'll have the officers take them. With a trembling hand, Hatcher reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and surrendered his license, the plastic card that defined his entire existence, his status, his ego. His life was gone. Elias turned to Jordan. His expression softened. Captain Banks, good eye. How bad is it, Elias? Jordan asked. Elias sighed, wiping rain from his forehead. It's bad. Jordan. The hydraulic line was cracked, but someone wrapped it in high-speed tape and painted over it with silver sealant to mimic the metal. It was a cosmetic patch on a critical system, a deliberate concealment to avoid an AOG aircraft on ground status. Jordan gasped. Liam Thorne, who had just walked out of the plane behind Hatcher, covered his mouth in horror. Tape, Liam whispered. We were flying on tape. Someone wanted this plane in the air at all costs, Elias said, and Captain Hatcher signed the pre-flight log, stating he had visually inspected the gear and found it sound, which means either he's blind or he didn't look. Hatcher stood there, stripped of his power, surrounded by the reality of his negligence. He looked at Jordan, waiting for her to gloat, to smile, to say, I told you so. But Jordan just looked sad. It didn't have to be this way, Bradley, she said. All you had to do was let me in the cockpit. The terminal was a pressure cooker. News of the federal raid on Flight 909 had spread through the gate area like wildfire. Passengers were huddled in groups, phones out, recording everything. The sight of Captain Hatcher being escorted away by police officers, minus his credentials, was already being live-streamed on TikTok and Instagram. But the real drama was unfolding in the VIP lounge, which had been commandeered by AeroVantage management as a makeshift crisis center. Jordan sat in a plush leather chair, a cup of lukewarm water in front of her. Across from her sat Gerald Fitzroy, the station manager for JFK. He was a man whose primary skill was making problems disappear, usually with vouchers and NDAs. He was sweating profusely. Captain Banks, Fitzroy began, loosening his tie. This is a regrettable situation, obviously. Safety is our #1 priority. Is it? Jordan asked, arching an eyebrow. Because I just watched the FAA peel duct tape off a hydraulic line. Fitzroy winced. We don't know the facts yet. It could be a manufacturing defect, a misunderstanding. It was a cover-up. Gerald, Jordan said. And Hatcher was either part of it or too lazy to catch it. He treated the pre-flight like a formality. Look, Fitzroy leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Hatcher he's old school. He's difficult. We know that. but he's 2 years from retirement. If this blows up, it destroys the airline's reputation. We're in merger talks with British Airways. A scandal like this, pilot negligence, racially motivated lockout, it could tank the stock. Jordan stared at him. Are you asking me to lie? No. No, heavens, no. Fitzroy waved his hands. I'm asking you to contextualize. We can frame this as a mechanical discrepancy, discovered by the crew that's you and Hatcher working together. We say you caught it during a routine check. Hatcher retires early, quietly, for medical reasons. You get a commendation, a fast track to chief pilot of the 787 fleet. We keep the FAA happy, we pay the fine, and we move on. It was a seductive offer. The chief pilot position was a career pinnacle. It meant more money, more prestige, and the power to change the culture from the top. All she had to do was let Hatcher keep a shred of his dignity and save the airline from a PR nightmare. And what about the way he treated me? Jordan asked. What about him throwing me off the plane because I'm a black woman? Do we contextualize that too? He was stressed, Fitzroy pleaded. He didn't mean it. Jordan stood up. She walked to the window of the lounge, looking out at the darkened airfield. She thought about the young black girls who messaged her on Instagram, asking if they could really be pilots. She thought about her father, a mechanic who taught her that integrity is what you do when no one is watching. If she took the deal, she won. She got the promotion. Hatcher went away. But the truth would be buried. The culture that allowed Hatcher to exist, the culture that let a senior captain skip safety checks because he felt untouchable, would remain. No, Jordan said, turning back to Fitzroy. Excuse me. I won't sign your statement. I won't co-sign a lie. Hatcher didn't catch the leak. I did. He kicked me off the plane. He assaulted me. And he tried to fly a death trap because his ego was bigger than his checklist. I'm filing my full report with the FAA, the union, and HR, exactly as it happened. Fitzroy's face hardened. The friendly negotiator vanished. Captain Banks, you are a relief pilot. You are replaceable. If you go to war with the airline, you will find yourself flying cargo to Anchorage for the rest of your career. We can make you difficult to work with. We can bury you in paperwork. You can try, Jordan said, picking up her flight bag. But I think you're forgetting something. Gerald. What's that? The passengers. At that exact moment, a shout erupted from the main concourse. Jordan and Fitzroy turned to look through the glass walls of the lounge. In the waiting area, a chaotic scene was unfolding. Hatcher had apparently been released from the initial police questioning and was waiting for a union rep. But he hadn't stayed in the private office. He had stormed out into the gate area, likely trying to find a bar or an exit, and had been cornered by angry passengers demanding answers about their cancelled flight. And Hatcher, drowning in adrenaline and humiliation, had snapped. Jordan opened the lounge door and stepped out onto the balcony overlooking the gate. Below, Hatcher was shouting at a young man holding a phone, a passenger named Marcus Hill, a popular travel vlogger. "Get that camera out of my face," Hatcher screamed, his voice cracking. "You people have no idea I am the captain. I decide when we fly. I don't answer to you. And I certainly don't answer to that affirmative action hire who thinks she can ground my bird." The crowd gasped. Phones were held higher. The flashlights blinded him. "So you admit it," Marcus yelled back, keeping the camera steady. "You kicked her off because of who she is, and you ignored a safety warning." "She's not a pilot," Hatcher roared, digging his own grave with every syllable. "She's a quota. And now look, you're all stuck here because the world is too soft to let real men do their jobs. It was over. In 10 seconds, Hatcher had destroyed any chance of a medical retirement. He had gone full racist, full misogynist, on 4K video, in front of 200 witnesses. Jordan watched from the balcony. She didn't feel triumph. She felt a cold, hard resolve. Beside her, Fitzroy watched the scene, his face draining of color. His phone started buzzing in his pocket. Then it buzzed again, and again. The PR storm wasn't coming. It was already here. You were saying something about burying me in paperwork. Gerald, Jordan asked quietly. Fitzroy didn't answer. He turned and ran back into the lounge, presumably to call the CEO and tell him the sky was falling. Jordan walked down the stairs toward the gate. The crowd parted for her. They saw the 4 stripes. They saw the calm face. They recognized her from the description Hatcher had just spat out. Marcus turned his camera toward her. Captain, is it true? Did you stop the flight? Did you find the leak? Jordan stopped. She looked directly into the camera lens. I did my job, Jordan said, her voice clear and steady. And at AeroVantage, safety is not a suggestion, it's the law. No one is above it, not even a senior captain. She didn't need to say more. She walked past the cameras, past the sputtering Hatcher, who was now being restrained by David, the flight attendant, and walked up to the podium. She picked up the PA microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Banks, she announced. The room went silent. Hatcher stopped shouting. I know you are frustrated. I know you are tired. Flight 909 is cancelled. However, she paused, looking at the stunned gate agent. Sarah, I have just spoken with operations. There is a spare 777 at gate A4 arriving from Dubai in 1 hour. A fresh crew is being called up. I will be commanding that flight. If you can bear with us for 2 more hours, I promise I will get you to London safely. And I promise you, I will personally inspect every inch of that plane before you board. A cheer went up, not a polite clap, but a roar of approval. Hatcher stood alone in the corner, watched by security, as the crowd cheered the woman he had tried to erase. The karma was swift, but the story wasn't over. Hatcher wasn't just going to lose his job. He was about to be the centerpiece of a federal investigation that would uncover something far darker than a piece of tape. The tape on the hydraulic line wasn't just laziness. It was a signature, and Jordan had seen it before. As she walked away from the podium, her phone rang. It was Elias Moore again. Jordan, his voice was urgent. Don't leave the airport. We just ran the maintenance logs. The mechanic who signed off on that repair in Chicago, he doesn't exist. The employee ID is fake. Jordan froze. What? This isn't just negligence. Jordan, Elias said. Someone is sabotaging the fleet, and Hatcher might not be the villain. He might be the scapegoat, or the accomplice. The rain at JFK had stopped, leaving the tarmac a vast, glistening mirror reflecting the flashing lights of emergency vehicles. But the storm inside the AeroVantage Operations Center was just beginning. Jordan Banks sat in a small, glass-walled conference room in Terminal 4, the kind usually reserved for VIPs or frantic parents who had lost a child. Across from her sat Director Elias Graham, formerly Vance, corrected for the record of the FAA, his face illuminated by the harsh blue light of a laptop screen. The air conditioning hummed aggressively, chilling the sweat on Jordan's back. Tell me I'm crazy. Elias, Jordan said, rubbing her temples. Tell me this is just a clerical error. A mechanic punched in the wrong employee ID. Elias turned the laptop toward her. On the screen was a database entry from the Aerovantage maintenance logs. Aircraft N772AV, nose landing gear, strut assembly, leak noted, repair sealant applied, sign-off ID 88421, M. Miller. We ran the ID, Elias said, his voice grim. Employee 88421 was a baggage handler named Michael Miller, who retired in 2019. He died of a heart attack last year in Florida. Jordan felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. So a dead man fixed a hydraulic leak in Chicago 2 days ago. Exactly. And it's not just this plane. Jordan, since I got your call, I had my team run a script on the maintenance logs for the entire 777 fleet flying transatlantic routes out of O'Hare and JFK, specifically looking for ID 88421. He clicked a key. A list populated the screen. 12 entries, 12 repairs, Elias said. All deferred maintenance items, all minor fixes that allowed the planes to keep flying without being grounded for expensive overhauls. A fuel pump in Boston, a flap actuator in Miami, a cargo door latch in Dallas, all signed off by the ghost of Michael Miller. Jordan stared at the list. This wasn't laziness. This was systematic. Someone is bypassing the safety protocols to keep the fleet utilization rate up. If they ground these planes for legitimate repairs, they lose revenue. They miss their quarterly targets. And the stock price drops, Elias finished. Aerovantage is in the middle of a merger. Jordan. They need their books to look perfect. They need their reliability stats to be at 99%. Grounding 3 or 4 wide-body jets for heavy maintenance would tank the deal. The door to the conference room opened. Officer Reynolds stepped in, looking uncomfortable. Captain Banks, Director Graham. There's someone here to see you. He says it's urgent. Behind him, a man in an expensive, rain-slicked trench coat walked in. He was tall, silver-haired, with the kind of polished veneer that screamed corporate legal. It was Arthur Calloway, the Senior Vice President of Operations for Aerovantage. He was accompanied by 2 younger lawyers who looked like sharks scenting blood. Director Graham, Calloway said, his voice smooth as silk. I was informed of the incident with Flight 909, a regrettable misunderstanding with Captain Hatcher. We are fully cooperating. Of course. He turned his gaze to Jordan. It was the look a predator gives to prey that refuses to run. Captain Banks, I understand you've had a stressful evening. I've had better, Jordan said. Not standing up. Calloway placed a briefcase on the table. We are prepared to make this right. The airline acknowledges that Captain Hatcher's behavior was unacceptable. He has been suspended pending an investigation. As for you, Jordan, we are impressed by your vigilance. We want to offer you a settlement for the emotional distress. He slid a thick envelope across the table. A settlement, Jordan asked. And a promotion, Calloway added. Chief pilot for the European sector. Based in London. Housing allowance. Significant raise. Effective immediately. All we need is for you to sign a standard non-disclosure agreement regarding the specifics of the maintenance discrepancy. We'll handle the FAA reporting internally. Jordan looked at the envelope. It was heavy. It probably contained a check with enough zeros to pay off her mortgage and buy a vacation home. She looked at Elias. He remained stone-faced, waiting to see what she would do. You want me to sign an NDA about a ghost mechanic? Jordan asked quietly. Calloway's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. I beg your pardon. Employee 88421, Jordan said. Michael Miller, the dead man who fixed the nose gear. You know about him, don't you? Arthur. The room went dead silent. The two lawyers shifted uncomfortably. I don't know what you're talking about, Calloway said, his voice hardening. This is a generous offer. Captain, I suggest you take it. If you persist in these conspiracy theories, you might find that your future in aviation is limited. The industry is small. People talk. You don't want to be known as the pilot who sues her own airline. Jordan stood up slowly. She picked up the envelope, weighed it in her hand, and then dropped it into the trash can next to the door. You're right, Arthur. The industry is small, and people do talk. Specifically, pilots talk. We talk about safety. We talk about trust. And right now, I don't trust you. She turned to Elias. Director, do you have enough to widen the scope of this investigation? Elias smiled, a shark-like grin that terrified the lawyers. Oh, I think we have enough to ground the entire fleet. Jordan, I'm issuing an emergency airworthiness directive. All AeroVantage 77s are grounded effective immediately until every single Miller repair is inspected. Calloway's face turned purple. You can't do that. It will cost us millions a day. It will kill the merger. Then you shouldn't have hired a ghost to fix your planes, Elias said. Officer Reynolds, please escort Mr. Calloway out. I believe the FBI will want to speak with him shortly regarding federal fraud and endangerment. Calloway looked at Jordan with pure hatred. You have no idea what you've started. Banks, you think you're a hero. You're a liability. You'll never fly again. Watch me, Jordan said. The next 48 hours were a blur of chaos. The grounding of the AeroVantage 777 fleet was global news. Thousands of flights were cancelled. Stranded passengers rioted in terminals from Tokyo to London. The airline's stock plummeted 30% in a single day. But for Jordan, the battle had moved from the tarmac to the boardroom. She was summoned to the AeroVantage headquarters in downtown Manhattan. Not by Calloway, but by the board of directors. They were in panic mode. They needed a scapegoat, and they needed a savior. Jordan walked into the boardroom wearing her uniform, crisp and immaculate. She was flanked by Elias Graham and her union representative, a tough-as-nails former pilot named Damon. At the head of the table sat Isabel Archer, the chairwoman of the board. She looked exhausted. On the screens on the wall, news channels were playing the footage of Hatcher screaming at the vlogger, interspersed with Jordan's calm announcement at the gate. Captain Banks, Isabel began, we are in a crisis. The FAA has shut us down. The public trusts us about as much as they trust a snake oil salesman. We need to restore confidence. Then stop lying, Jordan said, taking a seat. Excuse me. Calloway and his team were running a shadow maintenance program, Jordan said bluntly. They were using a third-party vendor, likely a shell company, to sign off on repairs that weren't done properly. They used the ID of a deceased employee to bypass the system. Hatcher was just a symptom. He was the kind of captain who didn't look too closely because he liked the bonuses that came with on-time departures. Isabel looked at the other board members. They were shifting in their seats. We were not aware of the extent of Mr. Calloway's actions, Isabel said. He acted alone. Don't insult my intelligence, Jordan snapped. Calloway was cutting costs to boost the EBITDA for the merger. You all saw the numbers. You all clapped when maintenance costs went down 15% last quarter. You didn't ask how. You just cashed the checks. Damon, the union rep, leaned forward. Captain Banks is right. And right now, the pilots are ready to walk. We have a vote of no confidence pending against the entire executive team. If you want planes in the air, you need the pilots to trust the planes. And right now, we don't. What do you want? Isabel asked, her voice defeated. I want full transparency, Jordan said. I want an independent audit of every maintenance log for the last 5 years. I want Calloway fired and prosecuted. I want Hatcher fired and stripped of his pension. And I want a new position created Vice President of Safety Operations, reporting directly to the board, with veto power over any flight, any time, and I want that person to be a pilot, not a bean counter. Isabel narrowed her eyes. And who do you propose for this role? Me, Jordan said. The room erupted. A relief captain demanding a VP role. It was unheard of. You have no executive experience. One board member shouted. I have the experience that matters, Jordan countered, her voice rising. I know what it looks like when a hydraulic line is taped together. I know what it feels like to be bullied by a captain who thinks he's God. And I know that if you don't do this, if you don't show the world that you are putting a whistleblower in charge, this airline is dead, the merger is dead, and you will all be testifying before Congress next week. The door opened. A secretary rushed in, looking pale. Chairwoman, it's the FBI. They're in the lobby. They have a warrant for Mr. Calloway's files, and they have a warrant for Captain Hatcher. Isabel looked at the screen, where the news ticker read, FBI raids Aero Vantage HQ. Criminal charges expected. She looked back at Jordan. She realized she had no choice. Jordan Banks wasn't just a pilot anymore. She was the face of integrity in an industry that had lost it. Fine, Isabel said. You get the audit. You get the VP role, interim. If you can get the FAA to lift the grounding order within a week, Jordan stood up. I'll get it lifted when the planes are safe, not a minute sooner. She turned to leave. Captain Banks, Isabel called out. What about Hatcher? Jordan paused at the door. What about him? He's in the lobby too. He wants to talk to you, before the FBI takes him. Jordan considered ignoring him, but she needed closure. I'll see him. The FBI raid on Aero Vantage headquarters was swift and brutal. Amidst agents seizing boxes of fraudulent maintenance logs, Jordan found Bradley Hatcher slumped on a lobby bench. The arrogance that had once barred her from the cockpit was gone, replaced by the trembling fear of a man facing federal charges. He revealed that Calloway had thrown him to the wolves, blaming Hatcher entirely for the Miller cover-up. Jordan looked down at him, not with pity, but with resolve. You have one card left to play, Bradley, she told him. Give them Calloway. Tell the feds about the pressure to fly unsafe planes. Stop protecting the men who set you up to fail. Hatcher, weeping, agreed to turn state's witness. It was the ultimate karma. The man who tried to destroy her career now had to rely on her moral compass to save what was left of his life. 6 months later, the atmosphere at JFK was transformed. Calloway was behind bars, serving a decade for corporate fraud. Hatcher was permanently grounded, his pilot's license revoked, serving a reduced sentence for his cooperation. But the biggest change was in the cockpit of Flight 909. Captain Jordan Banks, now dual-hatted as the airline's VP of safety, sat in the left seat. The 777 gleamed, its maintenance records impeccable under her new rigorous standards. Beside her was Liam Thorne, the first officer who had finally found his courage. As Jordan pushed the thrust levers forward, the engines roared a sound not just of power, but of trust restored. She had grounded the fleet to save the soul of the airline. As the wheels lifted off the runway, soaring past the very spot where she was once denied entry, Jordan smiled. She wasn't just a relief pilot anymore. She was the commander who proved that in the sky, character is the only currency that keeps you airborne. And that is the story of how one woman's refusal to back down saved hundreds of lives and brought down a corrupt corporate empire. Captain Jordan Banks proved that true authority doesn't come from a uniform or a title. It comes from integrity, competence, and the courage to do what is right, even when the world is screaming at you to stop. Bradley Hatcher learned the hard way that arrogance is a heavy burden that eventually grounds you. While truth is the only thing that really lets you fly, what do you think? Would you have stood your ground like Jordan, or would you have taken the money and walked away? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice and karma, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Fly safe, and I'll see you in the next video.